Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T. If you like all things true crime, if you like it delivered in a peaceful, tranquil manner, if you like it clear and concise without drama, then I highly recommend you subscribe. And if you like what you hear, please smash the like button. It's a free way you can help. And now, without further ado, let's dig in. Well, hello there. How you guys doing? I hope you are all well wherever you are, whatever time it is. I'm having an okay day. I hesitate to even tell you more about my life right now because it's so overwrought with medical problems with my dad. I just know some of you like to hear what's going on in my life, and so like today my dad found out that he has a growth on his leg that is cancerous, so he has to put chemo cream on that. I don't know anything about chemo cream. If any of you have any experience with that, please let me know in the comments. He also has a precancerous area on his nose. I mean, he's 92 and he was a bit of a sun god in his youth, hanging out on the beach along Lake Michigan in Wisconsin. He's always loved the sun. He's got like olive skin that's always like beautifully tanned. He doesn't even have to try. He's just always tan. And I think he thought that he was somebody who could never get skin cancer. Wrong. I'm not going to belabor this because I know that we all have problems like this. All I have to do is look at the comments. I can see that a lot of you are dealing with your own medical issues, with medical issues of your loved ones, with recent deaths. I mean, life ain't easy, but we have to be resilient. Some days are better than others. Moving on, let's get to the topic. In court today, 60-year-old New York architect and accused what I call serialist, I don't want to say the words because YouTube doesn't like them, Rex Heuermann was charged with the deaths of 2 more women, including one whose name was not previously mentioned in connection to him. The things I'm going to talk about today in this video may be disturbing, so I'm just giving you a forewarning. It's never pretty when you're talking about serialists. Father of 2 and husband to what appears to be the ever-loyal Asa Ellerup, Heuermann is now charged with the 1993 death of 28-year-old Sandra Castilla, as well as the 2003 death of Jessica Taylor. This means that Heuermann's alleged spree began earlier than previously believed. In fact, he was not yet married to Ellerup when Castilla died. The authorities said that they don't yet know how Heuermann met Castilla. She was a native of Trinidad and Tobago, and she was found posed with her legs apart and exposed, and her shirt pulled up to expose her chest. I've read that when serialists do that, they are trying to humiliate their victims. I think the more we learn about these crimes, the more we're going to see that Rex Heuermann, if he is the guilty party, has a very deep hatred toward women. This may be down to his mother allegedly being a very controlling type of mom when he was a child and a youth, or ute, as my cousin Vinny would say. As for Jessica Taylor, whose mother and cousin were in court this morning, she had been working in Manhattan as an escort when she was last seen on July 19th of 2003 after speaking to her mother on the phone and then taking an unknown call. At the time, Heuermann was working in the same area as where Taylor would, quote, street walk, and in fact records that were seized during initial searches after Heuermann was first arrested for 3 of the 4 Gilgo Beach victims show that he was in Midtown Manhattan on July 21st, 2003, the same day that Jessica went missing. Tragically, Jessica was found in the vicinity of Mill Road in Manorville, New York, on her back with her legs bent underneath her. She was missing her head and her arms, starting below the elbows. This would appear to be an act by the perpetrator to try and avoid having that body identified. In addition, a tattoo that Taylor had was also cut out with a sharp object. By the way, one hair was found in a surgical drape that was under Taylor's body, and that hair was recently found to match Rex Heuermann's DNA. His hairnet failed him once again, allegedly. In fact, Taylor's remains were found in 2 different locations. Some were off Mill Road, as I just told you, in Manorville, and some were found along Ocean Parkway, near where the Gilgo Beach 4 victims were discovered in 2011. Taylor's skull, hands, and forearms were found 8 years later, 40 miles away from that Manorville location, along that Ocean Beach Parkway. And in fact, her remains were found on the same side of the road as where the Gilgo Beach 4 victims were discovered. The police say that they spoke to a witness who saw a dark-colored Chevy pickup truck in the same wooded area in Manorville where Taylor was found around the time she went missing, and that truck matched the one that Heuermann was driving at the time. That would be the dark green Chevy Avalanche. And according to the bail application, although the Avalanche was only 4 months old at the time, Heuermann tried to buy a different one in either bright blue or some other lighter color. And it sounds like he knew that that vehicle had been spotted, but it sounds like he didn't buy a different Avalanche, and I wonder why. Would it have been difficult to explain buying a new one when he had just purchased this dark green one 4 months earlier? That would probably be something strange to try to explain to your family. Now, after Taylor's death, Heuermann looked up multiple local news articles about her remains and about her, and then he tried to delete the search. This means that if Heuermann is found guilty of all of these crimes, then he changed his modus operandi, or MO, over the years. If you've been following the Gilgo Beach case, then you know that those 4 victims were intact, so to speak. They were secured with tape, and in one instance with belts, and then they were wrapped in burlap. Taylor being cut up shows a very different manner of treating the victims, and it makes me wonder if Heuermann, if he is indeed the perpetrator, realized that cutting was simply too messy and risky. It takes time to do that. It's very messy. You probably get a lot of the red stuff on your own body, perhaps in your own vehicle. Of course, we don't know where Taylor was subjected to this brutality. Was it in the woods of Manorville? Sounds like it if she had that surgical drape underneath her, and that's where the dark-colored Chevy was spotted parked, round about the time she went missing. Or was it inside Heuermann's Massapequa Park, Long Island home? We haven't been told anything about that so far. As for Sandra Castilla, whose death is so far the oldest one connected to Heuermann, she was discovered by 2 hunters on November 20th in 1993. That year gives me chills because I lived in New York in 1993, and I lived in Manhattan, and I lived in Midtown Manhattan, right across from the Winter Park Theater. It makes me wonder if I ever crossed paths with Rex Heuermann as he was going to and fro work, but I wasn't working as an escort. I was a flight attendant. Now, Sandra was found lying on her back, and she had multiple injuries to her face, torso, chest, and groin area, according to the bail application. The investigators also found a hair on Castilla, including one, quote, from a tape list of the striped shirt above, end quote, her head. In 2014, DNA extracted from the hair was originally tested against John Bittroff, a convicted serialist who was once suspected to be connected to the Gilgo Beach remains, but it did not come up with a match. And so in April of this year, one male hair collected from Castilla was tested against Rex Heuermann's DNA, and investigators found that it was, quote, substantially more likely, end quote, that it came from him. And there was another piece of hair that was tied to the woman who had been living with Heuermann at the time of Castilla's death. And we know that Heuermann's wife, Asa Ellerup, some of her hair was also found with the Gilgo Beach victims. So I think that Rex just transferred hair from home onto his victims inadvertently. Per the bail document, it says that these hairs provide further support that Rex Heuermann mutilated, murdered, and transported the body of Sandra Castilla to Southampton. Now, in the bail application that was released today, it says that the authorities found a planning document on Heuermann's computer after his initial July arrest. The authorities say that he allegedly used this document as a, quote, blueprint to plan out his kills, end quote. Can this guy be any creepier? Oh my God. Now, this document was created back in 2000, and then it was modified twice before 2002. And it was basically a spreadsheet with 4 categories that were labeled respectively problems, supplies, DS, and TRG, with various words written under each category. So the problems category was allegedly a guide on how to avoid getting arrested, and it included words like DNA, tire marks, and blood stains. The supplies section included items he allegedly, quote, needed to carry out the crimes, including acid, that's scary, booties, and hairnets. The hairnets were likely to help avoid leaving his hair on the bodies and at the crime scenes, but we know those didn't work very well because some of his hair and his wife, Asa Ellerup's, and now some from a previous partner were found with some of the victims. The authorities say that at least Asa Ellerup was away from the area when the crimes took place, so she's not believed to be involved. The DS heading appears to be an acronym for dump site, which is corroborated by the discoveries of Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor at 2 separate dump sites, which are respectively in the vicinity of Mill Road and Ocean Parkway. Note that so far, Heuermann has not been charged with Mack's death, but he is the prime suspect in it. TRG appears to be a reference to target or victim. This guy took his sick work very seriously, didn't he? He's like a student of death. Now, if you followed the Gilgo Beach cases, you may recall that Heuermann, if he is indeed the perpetrator, seems to have a physical type. All the victims so far have been petite women. This seems to be supported by an entry in this document that reads, quote, small is good, end quote. This makes me wonder if he picked small victims simply because he's attracted to petite women, or was it more about them being easier to control and easier to transport to dump sites? The District Attorney Ray Tierney has said that Heuermann allegedly studied the book Mindhunter by John Douglas, and also he had another book by Douglas about a serialist in his Massapequa Park home. This would seem to indicate that Heuermann was driven to be a good serialist, as in one who both makes his mark in the annals of these sickos, and as in one who gets away with the crimes for as long as possible and manages to elude the authorities. I find this all very chilling, that he was studying the craft of this stuff. No wonder he's allegedly exchanging correspondence with BTK Dennis Rader. Rader is probably one of his heroes. So the document also has a 3-category section below, and the labels are pre-prep, then prep, and post-event. And the prosecutors are alleging that the sections were Heuermann's guide on how to start to plan each crime. It included things like checking his car and picking a target. These steps were noted directly before the slayings and his steps afterward to avoid apprehension. Thus, Heuermann is now facing charges related to 6 women's deaths, the Gilgo 4, and now Taylor and Castilla. And the authorities continue to try and make connections to Valerie Mack and Heuermann, and likely to other unsolved cases in the area. I personally want to know if Heuermann's wife, Asa Ellerup, will continue to support him and will continue to visit him in jail, and will the family still want to live in that now notorious red house? A house the color of blood, a house that likely sends chills down the spines of their neighbors. There's no reason to stay there anymore, in my opinion. They've said that property, because of its location, is worth a lot of money. So I think that maybe the local authorities need to make an offer to Ellerup that she can't refuse, and that will allow her and her kids to leave. Because let's face it, I mean, it cannot be easy living there, having your neighbors look at you when you walk down the street. Not easy for the neighbors to walk by that house. There's probably still gawkers hanging around. I mean, the whole scene is just awful. And we don't know what happened in the house. Nobody has said thus far if any of these victims were done inside that house. I honestly don't know how Ellerup's children sleep in that home. There has to be bad juju there, you know what I'm saying? Okay, I'm going to leave it here for now. I want to review the bail application in greater detail. Let me know if you are interested in learning more about this case. I want to gauge which cases the majority are interested in. I'm also finalizing a script that I keep promising on the Karen Reed case. I have done a previous video about the Karen Reed trial, which is basically very prosecution-centric, and I share their case against her, the evidence they have. Part 2 is going to be about the defense's strategy and Karen Reed's side of the story. The case is so complicated because there's so many people involved, and the defense is trying to poke holes in the evidence, the alleged estimated blood alcohol level of Karen Reed when she dropped off John O'Keefe at Brian Albert's house, where O'Keefe was found hours later unresponsive in the snow. Oh, there's so much. And the case is still ongoing. See you next time on Bed Crime Stories. If you enjoyed this and you learned anything, please smash that like button and please consider a super thanks.
The bail letter, and then turn it all over to you all for questions. But before I do that, before I discuss the indictment and the developments in the case, I want to thank our law enforcement partners, many of whom are here today. First and foremost, I want to thank the Suffolk County Police Department. My understanding is Commissioner Waring was unavailable today. I spoke with Rob, but he certainly brought a contingent of Suffolk County PD to represent his office. We have Deputy Police Commissioner Kevin Catalina. We have Chief of Detectives Darrell Simmons. We have Deputy Chief Stan Grodsky. We have, and then we have the Commanding Officer of the Major Crimes Unit, which includes the Homicide Unit, Sean Barron. So we want to thank all of them for their partnership. We want to thank the Homicide Unit for their continued efforts in this case. We have the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office here. Again, spoke with Sheriff Toulon. He's traveling out of state, so he couldn't make it. But it's my understanding that Under Sheriffs Steve Kios and Keith Taylor are here. We certainly want to thank them for their assistance as well. With the New York State Police, we have Major Stephen Udis, as well as Lieutenant Ken Gine. Again, we thank them not only for their presence here today, but more importantly, for their partnership in this case. We have the FBI, Supervising Special Agent Don Ansbacher is here. I want to thank the FBI for their continued assistance in this case. And then I don't believe they're present, but we have we want to thank the United States Secret Service for their assistance in this case. We want to thank the Suffolk County Crime Lab. I know they're not here, but their work has been tireless and instrumental, and we are really very appreciative to them. I especially want to thank the K-9 units from the New York State Police, from the Suffolk County Police, and from the NYPD, who came out a couple of weeks ago, and in very difficult conditions. They really did a fabulous job helping us to search an area of interest to us, and you know, they went above and beyond. So again, I want to thank them. I frequently neglect to thank my own team, so I'm going to take the opportunity to thank them. We have, you know, Chief Zacharis. We have, I want to thank them. I want to thank our ADAs, many of whom are working on this case. You heard from Nick Santamartino. We've got Larry Opizzo. We got Andrew Lee. We got Michelle Haddad. We've got a whole host of ADAs that have really been instrumental in us. Our investigators, our analysts, really fantastic work that they've done. I want to thank the victims' families, many of whom are here today, not only on the new charges, but for the original Gilgo 4. And this is what this case is about. We don't ever forget that. This case is about the victims and their families, and hopefully providing them with that small measure of closure. And you know, the families have been, you know, nothing short of incredible. The way that they continue to support their loved ones and each other is really inspiring to us, and really helps us to keep coming in and working this case as aggressively as we've been doing. This case is a true collaboration, and you know, again, mentioning all of those partners, without the contribution of any one of those partners, our ability to do this case would have been severely compromised. So again, I know I mentioned a lot of names, I know I went through a lot of agencies, but I just don't do that because it's the polite thing to do. I do it because it's the right thing to do, because they've really helped us instrumentally and will continue to help us going forward. Now, I'll just, before I get into the individual murders, the two new charges, what I want to talk about is at the time of the initial arraignment of the three out of the four Gilgo 4, and then at the superseding arraignment on the charges pertaining to Maureen Brainerd Barnes, and the Gilgo 4 was completed. At that time, you know, we said that we were going to continue to investigate this case, that the grand jury with regard to the Gilgo 4 is over, but the case continues. The criminal prosecution continues, but the investigation continues, and that investigation has been expanded. The investigation has been expanded both to the bodies that were found on Gilgo and beyond. That's what we said, and I think that has come to fruition today with these two new cases, or new charges. First off, with regard to Jessica Taylor, you know, that her body was recovered on July 26 in 2003 off of just west of Halsey Manor Road in Manorville. She was found on her back. She was decapitated, and her hands and arms were severed just below the elbows. Notably, a tattoo that she had been obliterated with a sharp object. 8 years later, her arms and skull were found on Ocean Parkway. Those remains were found on the same side of the road on the Ocean Parkway as the Gilgo 4. They were found less than a mile away from the remains of the Gilgo 4, and all of the 5 remains were located within 50 feet of the roadway. And I think you see that, the graphic on page 5 of our bail document illustrates that. Jessica Taylor was last seen July 19th in New York City. She was working as a sex worker. We know from from our investigation, from a number of financial records and other records, that the defendant, Rex Heuermann, was in New York City on July 19th. Jessica Taylor last spoke to her mom on July 21st, and then that was about 8:41 p.m. Then less than 2 hours later, her phone call made its last outgoing call, and we heard no more from Jessica or from her phone. The family alerted law enforcement on July 25th when she failed to return to her home for her mom's birthday, and then shortly thereafter, on July 26th, Jessica's body was recovered. At that time, the Suffolk County PD did canvass. They spoke to witnesses, and the witnesses had observed the night before, about 13 hours prior to the 911 call, they saw a dark-colored pickup truck backed up in the vicinity of off of Halsey Manor Road, where Jessica's body was eventually recovered. Computer activity by the defendant, which we were able to access through our search warrants, indicated that 2 days later, on July 28th, he accessed a Newsday article with regard to information on the case and with regard to the police looking for information on the case. That search was erased, but we were able to recover it. 1 day later, on July 29th, notably, the defendant was seeking to purchase a new Chevy Avalanche truck, notwithstanding the fact that he already had a dark-colored Chevy Avalanche truck, which was only approximately 4 months old at the time. The Chevy Avalanche truck, which we've been discussing all along, is dark-colored. His internet search related to the acquisition of the same Chevy Avalanche truck, but this time in white or bright blue. Bright-colored truck, completely different from the dark-colored truck that he had been riding in. And again, once again, that purchase with regard to the new trucks, that was attempted to be obliterated. We spoke, and Nick Santamartino did the bail application, so I don't want to repeat all that Nick said, but with regard to the hairs found in this case, Jessica Taylor was found laying atop a surgical drape. A male hair was found between the body and the drape. That was recovered back in 2003. In 2023, we brought that hair was brought to the mitochondrial testing lab for mitochondrial DNA analysis, and was able to the result. 99.96% of the population, but not Rex Heuermann, the defendant. Then again, later in 2024, we brought to a second lab for testing, and once again, the result was the defendant could not be excluded as the donor of that hair, and it's 1.837 times 10 to the 603rd power more likely that it came to, that it matched the defendant or someone matching the defendant's DNA profile than a member of the population at large. And that number, just so it's 1.837 times 10 to the 603rd power. So what you do is you take that 1.837 and you move that decimal point over 63 places and add zeros. That's the number. That number doesn't exist. It's so big. Among other things that we were able to establish with regard to the murder of Jessica Taylor was, once again, family travel. We were able to determine that at the time of the disappearance and death of Jessica Taylor, once again, the defendant's family was out of the state. They were staying at a resort known as Smuggler's Notch in Vermont. We were able to corroborate that information through witness statements, photos, and phone and financial records. In addition, there was a hard drive that backed up to a Palm Pilot, which was the defendant's date book, and in that, and again, this is chronicled in the bail application, but in that date book, it's indicated that his wife is in Virginia at Smugs from July 20th through July 27th, and that's page 14 of the bail document. With regard to the 1993 discovery of Sandra Castilla, again, on November 20th, 1993, two individuals while hunting in that wooded area of Southampton in the vicinity of Old Fish Cove Road in North Sea discovered her body. She was lying on her back with her arms outstretched over her head. Her legs were uncovered and her shirt was pressed over her head. The victim suffered numerous sharp force injuries, 25 in all, which we believe were post-mortem. And these were injuries to her face, torso, breasts, left thigh, and in her vaginal area. Once again, we had hairs recovered from Sandra Castilla. This is chronicled in the bail application. There were two hairs from Sandra Castilla's remains that are of particular significance in this case. One was a female hair that was recovered from the victim's right arm, and one was a male hair that was recovered from a tape lift of one of the shirts that the victim was wearing that was pushed above her head. In 2014, about 10 years ago, the two hairs plus another female hair which were found on Castilla were sent to an outside mitochondrial DNA lab for testing, and at that time John Bitroff was excluded as the donor of those three hairs. Those once the task force began investigating Gilgo and related cases, those hairs were retested in 2023 and 2024 and compared with the defendant's known sample from the buccal swab that we obtained. Regarding that male hair, the mitochondrial DNA profile developed from that male hair on the victim Castilla and the profile developed from the defendant's buccal swab are match, and specifically at a rate that would exclude 99.96% of and defendant Heuermann therefore cannot be excluded as the contributor of that male hair on Castilla. In March of 2024, that same male hair or an extract therefrom was brought to the same outside lab for nuclear DNA testing, and once again the results came back, and which found it was 4.347 times 10 to the 332 power more likely to have come from a person genetically identical to Rex Heuermann than from an unrelated individual. So that's 4.347, and then you move that decimal point over 332 times to get the odds. Again, an astronomically large number. Regarding the female hair, prior to with regard to the female hair, one of the female hairs that was recovered on Ms. Castilla, prior to Ms. Castilla's disappearance, the defendant had been living with a female individual at his home in Massapequa Park. The female individual lived with the defendant at his current residence through the summer and into the early fall of 1993, and vacated the premises approximately 2 months or so prior to Ms. Castilla's death in 1993. Once we got those two female hairs, once we knew of those two female hairs' existence, we went out and obtained a DNA profile, a buccal swab, from this female. And that DNA profile that we obtained from the female's buccal swab, we sent it to the mitochondrial testing lab. And again, it was able to exclude 99.98% of the North American population as the contributor of said hair, but it could not exclude the female who was living with Rex Heuermann. Again, we brought that same DNA and extract to the nuclear DNA testing, and the female's hair was tested and compared with the female hair that was recovered on the victim Castilla, and it was found to be 4.578 times 10 to the 1,040th power more likely have come from a person genetically identical to the female witness who was living with Rex Heuermann in 1993, shortly before Ms. Castilla's death, than from an unrelated individual. Again, that's 4.578, and you move that decimal point over 1,040 places, and that's the number. There was an additional female hair that was recovered in 2014. That was recovered, that was compared to both the female living with Mr. Heuermann and the defendant, and we could not get a match on that, and that remains unidentified, that female hair. So we have those DNA results, and again, we were able to establish, similar to all the other cases, that at or around the time of Ms. Castilla's disappearance and murder, Rex Heuermann was living alone at the house in Massapequa Park and had unfettered access to the house, and no one else was living with him at the time. So now I want to discuss some of the newly discovered digital evidence in the case. Before I discuss that, I just wanted to clarify some of the things that we've been talking about in our earlier press conferences. You were asked I was asked specifically about smart devices and digital devices that were recovered from the home and business of the defendant in connection with this case. So I just want to catalog that for you so you get a sort of flavor of what it was. We've recovered 15 different types of cameras. We've recovered 27 computers. We've recovered 58 internal hard drives. We recovered 22 external hard drives or solid drives. We recovered 46 cell phones. We recovered 9 Wi-Fi routers, 44 SD micro cards, which are like jump routers, 17 tablets, 42 USB devices, 8 laptop cards, 4 GPS devices, 11 music devices, 36 SIM cards, 33 miscellaneous items, and 647 CD, floppy disks, or VSH or miscellaneous tapes. Again, in the months subsequent to the arrest, we've been endeavoring through our own office and with the help of the Secret Service to analyze that massive amount of data. Analysis of those devices has revealed, certainly, that Heuermann had a significant collection of violent, bondage, and torture pornography, which was dating back to 1994, and that material was very similar to the condition that the 2 latest victims were left in. In addition to that, it is alleged that the pornographic images that were accessed by Heuermann are consistent with the crime scenes of both Sandra Castilla and Jessica Taylor. Now, as part of our processing of the electronic devices, the task force discovered a Microsoft Word document entitled HK 2002 through 2004. That was discovered on a laptop in unallocated space, meaning there was an attempt to erase that document. But as most forensic experts know, that even when a document is erased on a device, it is the user could no longer access that document, but forensic experts using particular software can retrieve it, and this document was retrieved in this case. It was a locally created draft, which means the document itself was created on the laptop. It wasn't downloaded from the internet. The document was modified. It was originally created in 2000, and it was overwritten a number of times and modified between 2001 and 2002. Now, as alleged in the bail application, the task force believes that this is a planning document, and it was utilized by Heuermann to methodically blueprint and plan out his kills with excruciating detail. We allege that this document evinces the defendant's intent in committing the charged crimes, that his intent was specifically to locate these victims, to hunt them down, and to bring them under his control and to kill them. His motivations, meticulous planning, and clear intent is obvious. His intent was nothing short but to murder these victims. And we allege that the methodology, that the exact method by which these murders were committed, in excruciating detail in that document is in some cases identical to the methodology used to murder the 6 victims in this case. Now, I don't want to speak further on the document. I believe the document